Welcome everyone, and I'm going to talk more about what it takes to become a multi-planet species. Just a brief refresher on why this is important. I think the future is vastly more exciting and interesting if we're a spacefaring civilization and a multi-planet species than if we're not. It's about believing in the future and thinking that the future will be better than the past. This is the updated design for searching for the right name, but the code name at least is BFR. We're really searching for what the right way. How do we pay for this thing? But now we think we've got a way to do it. To have a smaller vehicle, still pretty big, do everything that's needed in the greater Earth orbit activity. Essentially, we want to make our current vehicles redundant. We want to have one system, one booster and ship that replaces Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, and Dragon. So if we can do that, then all the resources that are used for Falcon 9 Heavy and Dragon can be applied to this system. So last time you saw the giant tank, that's actually a 12-meter tank, 1,000 cubic meters of volume inside. We developed a new carbon fiber matrix that's much stronger and more capable at cryo than anything before. We tested it, so we successfully tested it up to its design pressure. And then went a little further. That's actually extremely important for making a light spaceship. The next key element is on the engine side. We have to have an extremely efficient engine. It will be the highest thrust-to-weight engine, we believe, of any engine of any kind ever made. We fired it for 100 seconds. It could fire for much longer than 100 seconds. That's just the size of the test tanks. The test engine currently operates at 200 atmospheres, or 200 bar. The flight engine will be at 250 bar, and then we believe over time we could probably get that to a little over 300 bar. In order to land on places like the moon where there is no atmosphere, or to land on Mars where the atmosphere is too thin, you really have to get propulsive landing perfect. We now have 16 successful landings in a row, and that's with so the Falcon 9 lands on a single engine. Whereas BFR will always have multi-engine out capability. So you can essentially count on the landing. It's not like you want minimum pucker factor on landing. It will land back on its launch mounts, which means you need many launches per day. It's still a very small launch rate compared to what will ultimately be needed. Automated rendezvous and docking. In order to retank or refill the spaceship in orbit, you have to be able to rendezvous and dock with the spaceship and transfer propellant. Dragon 1 will do an automated rendezvous and docking without any pilot control. Dragon 1 currently uses the Canadarm for the final placement onto the space station. Dragon 2 will directly dock with the space station. You just press go and it will dock. A lot of people really only heard of SpaceX relatively recently. The reason I ended up being the chief engineer or chief designer was not because I wanted to, it's because I couldn't hire anyone. Nobody good would join. I messed up the first three launches. The first three launches failed. Unfortunately, the fourth launch, which was that was the last money that we had for Falcon 1, the fourth launch worked, or that would have been it for SpaceX. Today is the 9th anniversary of that launch. When we're doing Falcon 1, we're really trying to figure out what is the smallest useful payload that we could get to orbit. And thought, okay, something around half a ton, but it's really quite small compared to Falcon 9. Falcon 9 is many times more, it's sort of on the order of 30 times more payload than Falcon 1. Reuse of the primary booster, which is the most expensive part of the rocket, and hopefully soon reuse of the fairing, the big nose cone at the front. It sounds easy. Let's show Falcon Heavy actually. It sounds like it should be easy because it's two first stages of Falcon 9 strapped on as boosters. We had to redesign almost everything except the upper stage in order to take the increased loads. Falcon Heavy ended up being much more a new vehicle than we realized. The boosters have all now been tested and they're on their way to Cape Canaveral. You can see the payload difference is quite dramatic. BFR in fully reusable configuration, without any orbital refueling, we expect to have a payload capability of 150 tons to low Earth orbit. You've got obviously the engine section in the rear, the propellant tanks in the middle, and then a large payload bay in the front. You can fit a whole stack of Falcon 1 rockets in the payload bay. Depending on whether you're landing or you're entering a planet or a moon that has no atmosphere, a thin atmosphere, or a dense atmosphere. And so the delta wing at the back, which also includes a split flap for pitch and roll control, allows us to control the pitch angle despite having a wide range of payloads in the nose and a wide range of atmospheric densities. The cargo area has a pressurized volume of 825 cubic meters. The Mars transit configuration consists of 40 cabins, 5 or 6 people per cabin, if you really want to crowd people in, 2 to 3 people per cabin. And so normally about 100 people per flight to Mars. This is where the propellant is located. In the fuel tank are header tanks. So when you come in for a landing, your orientation may change quite significantly. The ship engine section consists of four vacuum Raptor engines and 2 sea-level engines. If one of the center engines fails at any point, it will be able to land successfully with the other engine. And then for refilling, where you just saw, the two ships would actually mate at the rear section. They would use the same mating interface that they use to connect to the booster on liftoff. And then to transfer propellant, it becomes very simple. Use control thrusters to accelerate in the direction that you want to empty. This gives you sort of a rough sense of rocket capability, starting off at the low end with the Falcon 1 at a half-ton. Fundamental point. Let's look at the launch cost. The order reverses. The same is true of aircraft. If you bought, say, a small single-engine turboprop aircraft, that would be $1.5 to $2 million. Fully reusable giant aircraft like a 747 costs a third as much as an expendable tiny aircraft. It's really crazy that we build these sophisticated rockets and then crash them every time we fly. This is mad. And often I'll be told, but you could get more payload if you made it expendable. I say, yes, you could also get more payload from an aircraft if you got rid of the landing gear and the flaps and just parachute it out when you got to your destination. But that would be crazy, and you would sell 0 aircraft. If you just fly BFR to orbit and don't do any refilling, if you send up tankers and refill in orbit, you can refill the tanks all the way to the top and get 150 tons all the way to Mars. And the cost of oxygen is extremely low, and the cost of methane is extremely low. The cost of refilling your spaceship on orbit is tiny, and you can get 150 tons all the way to Mars. Then all of the resources, which are quite enormous, that are used for Falcon 9 Heavy and Dragon, can be applied to one system. But all of our resources will then turn towards building BFR. And we believe that we can do this with the revenue that we receive for launching satellites. The size of this being a 9-meter diameter vehicle is a huge enabler for new satellites. We can actually send something if you want to do a new Hubble, you could send a mirror that has 10 times the surface area of the current Hubble. It's also intended to be able to service the space station. I know it looks a little big relative to the space station. It looks a little outsized, but it'll work. We can actually do lunar surface missions with no propellant production on the surface of the moon. We can go all the way to the moon and back with no local propellant production on the moon. Moon base alpha, or some sort of lunar base. Yeah, but so this will enable the creation of a lunar base. And it's 2017. I mean, we should have a lunar base by now. What the hell's going on? Fairly confident that we can complete the ship and be ready for a launch in about 5 years. 5 years seems like a long time to me. Yeah. But that's our goal, is to try to make the 2022 Mars rendezvous. Earth-Mars synchronization happens roughly every 2 years. So every 2 years there's an opportunity for to fly to Mars. So then in 2024, we want to try to fly 4 ships. So we should, particularly with 6 ships, there have plenty of landed mass to construct the propellant depot, which will consist of a large array of solar panels, very large array. Then build up the base, starting obviously with one ship, then multiple ships, then start building out the city, then making the city bigger, even bigger. and over time, terraforming Mars and making it really a nice place to be. Thanks. Give me Let's take a look at that. So, yeah, so the great thing about going to space is there's no friction. So once you're out of the atmosphere, you will go, it will be smooth as silk, no turbulence, nothing. There's no weather, there's no atmosphere. And if we're building this thing to go to the moon and Mars, then why not go to other places on Earth as well? All right, thank you.